Hi all. This is our third class regarding the React.js. So in the earlier classes, we have come up from the basics of React.js, how to create a project, what is the folder structure, how the virtual DOM works, how to create a sample component called welcome, and how to use that, how to import, how to export, how to generate a dynamic content here like that. So in this class, we are going to learn about the main core concepts of React, that are properties, props. We call this as a props. Properties are the main core concepts in the React.js. We use props. Props are nothing but properties. For every component, there will be some kind of properties. These components, these properties will help in defining the initial state of a component. Let's see that in action. Earlier, let's see the output for what we have now. So see, we have used 3 times welcome component. So with different content, 25, 24, 2. So we could able to use a component with dynamic content. So this is what we have used earlier, but we need to make these components as dynamic. So that we are going to do with the help of the props. Let's do that. So we have used a welcome component in app.js. So what are props? How we are going to send them? Properties are nothing but props are nothing but properties. For example, I'm welcome. I'm giving a name called Suresh. Also welcome a name called Nandu. And for another component, I'm giving welcome name Manu. So I have given, there are 3 components and I'm giving 3 different props for each and every component. And how this component is going to use these properties in its components. Whenever React.js triggers or compiles this line, it will come here and it will catch the properties as an object. We can pass multiple attributes here for an component. We can pass n number of components, like I can pass age, like I can give it as 30, and here I can give the age as 10, and also I can here the age as 4. So we can pass n number of properties for a component. All these properties comes into this parameter. Here we need to give some object. All these props or attributes comes into this property. This is default object which is going to catch these properties here. So the name could be anything. You can give any name here, but props is recommended so that other developers can also easily understand what all the props this component is expecting. So I will just remove this random content, and how these props we need to use, how we are going to use these props in our component. So we know that this is a special syntax which we need to give an expression in between these flower braces. It will be evaluated into a value. It's like a dynamic content generation. Whatever the dynamic values you are going to give, it will be evaluated into a value. So we need to give the props in this way: flower brace props dot name. Okay, now we'll make this more meaningful, like I'm trying to give welcome Suresh, your age is. So we have 2 properties in the props object. If you console here, we'll be getting 2 props. I mean, it will be like an object with 2 properties. It looks like this: name. For the first element, it looks like in this way: name Suresh, comma age 30. It looks like in this way. When I debug this, or when I console this, or 3 times it will log in this way. It means it is passing the properties as an object. So for the first component, the object would be with these values. So I'm using props.name. Your age is, now I need to use this as props.age. This is there is no much fancy or fancy code here. So it's very pretty much straightforward. Like we are getting an object in this props. The object will be looking like this, and I wanted to replace that object with the values here, like props.name. This is an expression. It will be evaluated into a Suresh. Props.age. This will be evaluated into 30. So this is what how we are going to use the props. The parent component will be loading the welcome component, child component, and the parent component here. The parent component is nothing but app component. In this app component, we are using multiple reusable components. That is welcome component. For that, each welcome component, we are passing different properties. These properties were catched and held by this props parameter. This can be any name, but we are recommended to use only props so that others can easily identify that those are properties. So how we are going to use that properties? Props.name, props.age. Let's see what happens in the browser. See, welcome Suresh, your age is 30. Welcome Nandu, your age is 10. Welcome Manu, your age is. So whatever we have given there, all the components have been loaded in this way. For example, we'll console it. We have also consoled it, right? Let's see, here we got three different objects. So see, we got an object with this content. You can identify the object, right? We have given an object here. So this was consoled in the browser. So in that way, you can access these properties in your component. So we need to observe few things here, like the props we are sending here, and we are able to hold here, and we are able to view here. So props are only read only. We can't modify it. The main point here is props are only read only. There will be no dynamic content here. Okay, whatever the property the parent component sends, we are going to take that in the way of props. So the main thing is like parent component. What are the uses of these props? The parent component can pass basic info to the child component. Here the parent component is nothing but app component is parent component, whereas a child component is nothing but welcome component. This is a child component. In this way, the parent component can pass the data to the child component with the help of properties. Properties are only read only. So this is the one thing you need to understand. So further, so we have one more special attribute for these properties. So here we have given like this. So let me do in this way, like we'll close here. So this is the children. So I'm giving outside of these braces. I'm closing. These are called as properties, and these are called as children of welcome component. So there are some situations, or there are some ways we need to work with the components by sending this uh, children components as well. Here it may not be a text. Here you can give any component, div, anything in between welcome component. If you give, that will be acts as a children property. So how you are going to uh, access this property in the welcome component? Let me create one more paragraph here. So here I'm going to access this as props dot children. So if you identify here, there is no children property. Here there are two properties called name and age, so that you could able to use name and age like this. But there is no children property in in this props object. Then how we are going to use this? So let's check in the output. See, welcome Suresh, and for only Suresh, this dot child we could able to get. For the rest of the two components, we are not getting this. This is because we are not sending the child property for the other two welcome components. So that's the reason we are not getting this in the output for these two components. So if you observe, we are sending, this is the default children attribute given by React.js, so that anything which you declare here, whether it is a text or whether it is a really a component or HTML tags, everything, whatever you give here, it should be accessed in the component in this way. Props.children. What all we give here, it will be accessed in this format. So those children would be present for, I will show you in the console. I will inspect element here. So for example, if you see for the first component, we have welcome Suresh, and this is a child. Okay. For the rest of the two components, if you see, there are empty paragraphs. For the rest of the two components, there are empty paragraphs. This is because we are using welcome component, and whereas they have no children like props.children, there we have not defined props.children. So this would be null and just an empty paragraph would be displayed. I mean, there won't be any value here for them. So an empty props would be displayed there. So this is a special, props.children is a special property. So this is all about props, a brief and small understanding what is a props, and we need to further come to the state. So another important building block of core concept or feature of React.js is state. So state, what is a state? As we have discussed earlier, state is nothing but every component or every element will have certain state. So where if that state changes, it's going to re-render the component again. So that was the main thing here. So me show let me show you that in an example here. To use state, where we need to have in the to use state, we need to have a class component, or from 16.8 React version, we got React hooks, where in the functional component also can use state components. State. Initially, there would be two things. Before explaining what is state, let's talk about stateless and stateful. Like we have stateless component or a presentational component. What does it mean? We call a presentational component, we use a presentational component only for the purpose of display purpose. There won't be any re-renders. If the parent component changes, the child component would be changing. It means stateless component means there is no re-renders because of the state in that component. That's called as a stateless component. And we need to understand state can be used only in class components. Okay, this is till 16.8, till React hooks are not introduced before. So we'll in this whole sessions of playlist, I will be explaining how we are going to use a state with class first, and later I will do a series of React hooks. I mean, in the functional components itself we can use React state. In the functional components itself we can use React state that comes under the React hooks. I will be doing a separate series for that. What are React hooks, and how we are going to use that use state in the presentational functional components. So for now, we are going to use the state in a class component. This is a traditional way of using state in a class component. React hooks are the latest version of React.js, where it has many features to use React hooks in a functional component. Before that, I will convert this to a class component, and I will be explaining what is the state exactly. In upcoming classes, we can see what are hooks and how can we use a state in the functional component itself. So let me convert this functional component into a class component. In that way, we can learn how to convert a functional component into a class component. Here, if you observe, it is a function. This function is going to return an HTML, JSX syntax. So if it is a function, it returns a component. Any component in React.js should return. I will write this point. Any component in React.js should return or render an JSX. This should be for sure. It should return or render a JSX component. As it is a function, we are just returning the div component. I will convert this functional component into a class component. For that, what I am going to do, remove this function keyword and do class, and remove this parenthesis extends component. Yeah, I'm extending this component. If you see, as on when I have extends component, it was automatically included here. This is because I have included few React.js in inbuilt snippets. So usually it happens in this way. Like I am extending here, and if I click here, it is auto import from React. It's asking it to auto import from React. So it was auto imported here. So usually what happens is we need to extend it component, and here we need to declare, like I will show. Once you extend this component, we can find this component in the React package. So in the React package, I can extend this component. I'm taking this component from React package and I'm extending our app component with this component, so that now this app component can use the state and all the component lifecycle methods. So now this app component has the capability of using the component lifecycle and state as well. So it's showing some issue. So let's resolve that. For classes, we need to render a method. So now it will go the issue. As we have seen earlier, if it is a function, we are going to return a JSS syntax, JSX object or a component. For a class, we need to render a function. In that also, there won't be anything more than this. We are going to return a component, JSX syntax based component. So in this way, yeah, here we have modified this as a class. So now we are trying to use state values. So let me do this. State is a default object which we will be getting from the component. We should give state like this only. It will be available from component. We are going to get this state object from the component. It is nothing but an object. We are going to give a person's object, like it will be a person's object here. Let me define one person's object where the name, I will give the same names here, what all available here, so that I'm defining the default state here, nothing more than that. This state component will be, we got the state component from the component, state object from the component. I'm giving, just wanted to make a couple of objects. So here we'll change the data so that it backs the same. So we have seen here, we have used properties to send the data. So here we use the objects. This is the default state we give in this way. So how we are going to access this person here? So we are going to access, now I'm not sending like this, I'm not hard coding this state object we can get dynamically. So now for now I'm showing what is a state. I have defined a default state for here, and now instead passing a props in this hard coded format, I wanted to access this from state. So how I am going to send a state value as a property to the welcome component. So this is what we are going to this is nothing but the current class, so that I can access this app instance properties. So this dot state dot persons of 0 dot name. So in the same way I'm going to give for all other thing, so that I can access the state and I can send that as a properties to the welcome component. So this is the way we need to do. So now I'm trying to access the state. So this is the default state we define. State is an object which we are going to use, and we could able to use here because we have extended this from the component, and we are trying to use that state uh, uh, in the properties, and we are sending them as a properties to the welcome component. Let's see the output. It will be in the same format. Okay, let's see what was the issue here. Cannot read property 0 of undefined. So let's check. Yeah, we have given person here. So the object is persons. So we have given a person. So that's the main issue here. So that's the reason we got that issue. So now I think we could able to access. Check. Yeah. So what we have seen here. So state is a dynamic content. So state is nothing but it's dynamic. So it can be changed. It can be changed at any point of time. So state is it can be changed at any point of time. And right now we are able to use the state object because we have extended component from React package. So this is the reason we could able to use. So the till now we are considering the functions as a presentational component, whereas class component has the capability of using the state for now. So further we can see the React hooks. So now what we have done, we could able to pass the state value as a property, as a props to the welcome component. This is what we have done. This is the way we need to do. So further in any of the applications also we are going to do in this way. So 0 refers to the first object, 1 refers to the second object, 2 refers to the third object. So this is the way we are going to access the things. So, and one more thing we need to understand is, for any change in the properties or the state, this render method is going to re-trigger. Okay, this render method will be re-triggering for any of the change in the state or props. Let me write that point. For any change in the props or state, the render method going to re-trigger. I mean it's going to re-render. It's going to re-render that what it's going to re-render the method. So this is the main point we have. So further I will explain you how to add an event to our React component. So let me explain how we add the React component. So before that, let me explain you here. If you observe, this is a class name. So usually in our HTML, we'll be using like this class app. So we in for any class app has a class syntax. I mean CSS. We wrote app as text align center. So this is the CSS we wrote for app, and we could able to use in this way. This is for the regular HTML. For React.js, we need to use this as class name. This is because class is already used. We are already using the class ES6 class to define a class. So we should not use class directly as we have used in the DOM elements. We need to name this as a class name. In a similar way, there are few attributes which we need to change them, like class name, tab index, like that. But most of the time, we are going to use only class name itself. Just one thing to remember, earlier for DOM HTML elements, we need to point a class CSS with class property attribute. Now as we have ES6 classes we are going to use, so that may cause some confusion here. So in the JSX we are going to use this class, instead class we are going to use it as a class name. So let me write that point. In JSX we will be pointing the class CSS with class name attribute, instead class, as we do for DOM, for HTML tags. In HTML tags, we are going to refer class to pointing for a class CSS. Whereas in the React.js JSX, we are going to rename it as class name. The main reason for this, as we discussed, we are using ASIX classes, so there will be some conflicts like the same class. It may be some ambiguity, so the name was changed to the class name. That's it. That one point. And another thing, just I wanted to add one, show the button events here, how the button clicks happen here. Just I'm writing the HTML. This there is no nothing new here. Just I'm writing a button and I'm writing an on click event for this. Usually we write events in this way in for HTML, like single everything in a smaller case, like lower case. But in React.js, we need to like events should be defined in camel case, like on click. This is how we use in React. This is another change. Uh, in the normal HTML, we are going to use in this way, like we'll write like on click. This is the one we are going to write in HTML. Whereas in React.js, we are going to do the same event like on click. Not only this on click, all the event triggers, event handles, events will be in a camel case like this. So this was one more change we need to observe. So let me write an event here like on click. So as I said, this C should be capital in React.js. Now I am giving flower base should be given this dot handle button So I'm giving it here. I need to write an handle button. I'm going to write a function to handle that button click. So this is what I'm going to write. This is called as an arrow function. Let me explain a bit about these arrow functions. These are the new feature of ES6 where there will be many benefits while writing these arrow functions. The major benefit would be we can access this directly here. If it is an arrow function. Whereas if it is not an arrow function, we need to bind this. This is nothing but the instance of this class. If anywhere we refer here this, it's nothing but it is an instance of this class, so that it has a ability and capability of accessing the class properties. Okay, like in the same way we have accessed the class property object of state. So the main advantage as I have defined the method is arrow function. Use of it is automatically this will be binded. Usually we need to bind this for an event handlers. So usually for any JavaScript uh, development, we for any event, if you write like this, and this will be not accessible inside this method, as we are not binding this method to the class element. So we need to explicitly bind this method to the this keyword of this class, so that only we can use this inside this method. So as it is an arrow function, it will be automatically have this capability. So one more point I wanted to explain here is, see, let me show that in an example. So as a I'm writing it as a button click. Why? Because this method needs to trigger only when I click the button. Okay. Why? Because I wrote in that way. On click of this method needs to trigger. Okay. When I click this button, this method needs to be triggered here. So that was a syntax I wrote here, but just observe what happened here. I have not clicked the button yet. So see, it was saying 2 times the button was clicked. I have not even clicked the button. Just I will refresh it again. So see, button was clicked for 2 times, but I am not clicked it. I'm not even clicked it. So why it is coming that way? Let me show you. This is because while it is rendering, it's going to call, I have used parentheses. So what does it mean? It will call the function. So that's the reason before I am clicking the trigger me button, we are going to execute this function. React.js is going to execute this function. This is the reason. As we have mentioned the parentheses, this when the render function executes, this method will execute automatically. So that's the reason. So here we should not use parentheses. This is very much important. So many times many of the developers initially they do the common mistake of using parentheses. Usually this will do for JavaScript. So that's the main change. I'm just wanted to say everything what in terms JavaScript is doing and what in terms React.js is doing. Just I wanted to explain both the things. In the JavaScript, we can use parentheses. When I click the button, it will call this function. That was the meaning in the JavaScript. Whereas in React.js, initially it is going to render this component. In that stage, if we give parentheses here, it means we are trying to call this function as on when it renders, so which is not correct. So just we need to pass the reference of this function. So as on when I trigger this button, then only this function would be triggered. So that's the main important point we need to understand here. So let me show it again. So now if you see, it was not triggered. We did not got any console of button clicked. So let me trigger it again and I will show you. See, as on when I click, then only I can able to see the events here. So the main difference is this one. In the JavaScript, we are going to give parentheses like this for the events, so that whenever I click that, we are going to call this method. Whereas here we are not giving this parentheses. This is the we are only giving the reference. This is because the return function is going to execute as on when this component is executed. So that's the main reason. That's the reason we are not giving parentheses there. Let me write this point as well. For events methods, we just need to pass the reference. We should not give parentheses. Okay, this should not be given as we do. Let me write the reason as well. Why? Because we can understand better. Like in React.js, we are going to render the return function, right? So in that time only the method will be triggered. So this was a common mistake the developers used to do. So that I was trying to mention it more clearly. So that's all for today. Let's ramp up what we have learned. So we have seen how to pass the properties, and we have seen how to catch those properties, how we are going to use that properties in our component, and we have also seen what all the child components we can send for a property and how to access them. And also we have seen what is state and how to define it in a class component, how to access that state, how to pass that state to as a property, and also how to use the events, I mean the naming conventions for the class name, and events like on click. Any events will be in this camel case. Usually not for JavaScript there would be like on click, but for React.js for any events it would be like camel case only. The most important point, we are not going to specify the parentheses. We will be directly giving this function here. So this function, this is a function, this is called as an arrow function. The main usage of this arrow function is this can be automatically bended here. So in the further classes, we'll be explaining how to modify this state and what all the events we can handle here. So in further classes, we are going to modify the state here, and we will do some manipulations, some interactions between the this application. So that's all for now. Thanks a lot.